In the 14th century, a king arose, who would bend the world's attention toward Africa. His name was Mansa Musa, and in an age dominated by European monarchies, Arab dynasties, and expanding Asian empires, he stood tall, cloaked in wealth, diplomacy, and divine purpose. But before Mansa Musa became the richest man in world history, before his legendary pilgrimage to Mecca shook the economies of entire nations, before gold flowed like water in his courts, there was a story of succession, of transformation, and of ambition that reshaped the destiny of Mali. This is the story of how Mansa Musa, son of the Keita dynasty, climbed to the golden throne and laid the foundations of an empire that would stand as a marvel in African history. Before Musa came to power, the Mali Empire was already a rising star on the African continent. The empire was founded in the early 13th century by the legendary Sundiata Keita, a warrior king who united the Mandinka tribes and defeated the powerful Sasso kingdom at the Battle of Kirina around 1235 CE. Under Sundiata's reign, Mali grew from a collection of clans into a structured kingdom. Trade routes linking the Sahel to North Africa, the Middle East, and beyond were established. Mali's control of the trans-Saharan trade routes, especially the lucrative salt and gold exchange, meant the empire grew both politically and economically. By the early 1300s, Mali was stable, but not yet the legend it would become. It had fertile lands, a strong warrior tradition, and a growing trade network, but it needed a visionary to elevate it to greatness. That visionary was Mansa Musa. Musa was born in the late 13th century into the royal Keita family. By bloodline, he was a legitimate heir to the throne, though not the immediate successor. His path to kingship came through an extraordinary twist of fate. His predecessor, Mansa Abu Bakr II, was obsessed with discovering what lay beyond the Atlantic Ocean. According to Arab historians like al-Umari, Abu Bakr believed the ocean was not the end of the world. So, he assembled a massive expedition, 200 ships, filled with men, gold, provisions, and knowledge seekers. The fleet vanished. Some say they reached the Americas, others say they perished in the sea. When Abu Bakr did not return, Musa, who had been appointed as regent during his absence, was crowned Mansa, king, around 1312 CE. He was still young, likely in his early 30s, but his rise marked a turning point for the empire. He did not ascend with brute force. Musa came to power with calm authority, patience, and deep strategic awareness. He brought with him a vision not just for Mali's dominance, but for its elevation economically, spiritually, and culturally. Once crowned, Mansa Musa immediately set to work. The Mali Empire, under his leadership, reached its geographical and economic zenith. Musa expanded Mali's borders significantly. By the height of his reign, the empire covered nearly 1.2 million square kilometers, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to the edges of modern-day Niger in the east, and from southern Algeria down into what is now Burkina Faso. Cities such as Timbuktu, Gao, Jen, and Niani became the jewels of the empire. These were not only centers of commerce but also of Islamic scholarship, governance, and art. Musa's administration was decentralized but highly effective. The empire was divided into provinces, each ruled by a governor or noble, loyal to the Mansa but responsible for local affairs. Tax collection, military recruitment, and justice were handled at the local level, with regular communication to the imperial court in Niani. Mansa Musa was a devout Muslim, and his reign is considered one of the most successful examples of Islamic governance in West Africa. However, he also upheld the traditional customs and values of his people, maintaining harmony between Islamic law, Sharia, and indigenous practices. Mali's wealth under Mansa Musa is legendary, so much so that it has inspired modern economists to call him the richest man who ever lived. The Mali Empire sat upon the richest gold fields in the world at the time. Gold was the backbone of the economy, and under Musa's rule, Mali produced over half of the world's gold supply. Gold nuggets were too abundant to be weighed, instead, they were stacked and stored. The empire controlled gold mines in Bambuk, Bure, and Gollum, and no gold nugget larger than a set size could be traded without passing through royal hands. Salt, equally valuable and more essential to survival, came from the Sahara Desert. Salt slabs were hauled across scorching dunes by camel caravans, then exchanged for gold in great trading cities like Tagaza and Timbuktu. Mali's wealth was diversified through the trade of ivory, kola nuts, slaves, and cloth. These goods flowed across the Sahel and Sahara, reaching the markets of Cairo, Marrakesh, Fez, and eventually, Europe. Musa's Mali was the beating heart of the Trans-Saharan trade network. The empire maintained and protected thousands of kilometers of trade routes. Guarded by soldiers, patrolled by cavalry, and managed by tax officials, Timbuktu became the crossroads of African trade. A single caravan could carry tons of goods, hundreds of camels long, bearing not just commodities but also ideas, books, and technology. Behind Mali's glittering wealth was a complex human structure, a massive population of workers, warriors, scholars, and servants. At its height, the Mali Empire had an estimated 20 million people. Most were agrarian workers, farmers, herders, and artisans. The Niger River Valley provided fertile lands for rice, sorghum, millet, and other crops. Mansa Musa commanded an enormous number of domestic workers and slaves, not for mass export but for labor within the empire. According to both oral history and Arabic chronicles, Musa had over 12,000 servants, many of whom carried gold staffs, wore silk garments, and served as administrators, court attendants, and caravan leaders. During his famous pilgrimage to Mecca, it's recorded that 500 of his slaves each carried a 4-pound bar of gold, not as security, but as symbols of Mali's limitless wealth. Though Musa was more known for diplomacy than warfare, he still commanded one of the largest armies in Africa. His standing army is estimated to have numbered over 100,000 soldiers, with 10,000 cavalry. These forces protected trade routes, defended borders, and enforced the law. Mali's soldiers were well equipped. Iron-tipped spears, bows, and swords were produced locally, and the elite cavalry wore armor and carried large hide-covered shields. Musa's military might was rarely used for conquest after his early expansions. Instead, it was a tool of deterrence, ensuring internal stability and external respect. By the 1320s, Mansa Musa had achieved what few African rulers ever had. He ruled over the largest and richest empire in West Africa, governed with justice and tolerance, promoted Islam and education, and protected the people who made the empire thrive. But Musa was not done. He sought more than temporal glory. He wanted the world to know Mali, not just as a trading empire, but as a beacon of Islamic civilization. And so, in 1324, he began preparing for what would become one of the most iconic journeys in human history, the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. What began as a spiritual obligation would soon become a spectacle that stunned the world and changed history. In the year 1324 CE, Mansa Musa, Emperor of Mali, prepared for the journey of a lifetime. What was meant to be an act of faith and devotion, his sacred Hajj to Mecca, would soon transform into a world-changing display of wealth, diplomacy, and global power. This was not a simple pilgrimage, it was a procession of prestige. A thunderous caravan stretching for miles across the Sahara, shimmering with gold, echoing with music, and surrounded by soldiers, scholars, slaves, servants, and noblemen. It was a parade of Africa's greatness, one that would leave cities trembling. Historians in awe, and kings of distant lands rethinking their place in the world. The Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, a duty that all Muslims must perform once in their lifetime if they are able. For Mansa Musa, it was both a spiritual calling and a chance to demonstrate Mali's might on the international stage. Musa did not travel lightly. According to the historian Shihab al-Umari and others who documented the journey, the royal procession included 60,000 men, royal guards, court officials, scholars, merchants, servants, 12,000 slaves, each carrying 4-pound bars of gold. 80 to 100 camels, each laden with up to 300 pounds of gold dust, musicians, griots, oral historians, cooks, and spiritual advisors, a personal escort of thousands of armed soldiers and cavalry, his senior wife, Inari Kunate, accompanied by 500 female attendants dressed in silk and fine linen. The caravan moved in grand fashion, with golden parasols shading the emperor and his closest advisors, drummers announcing their arrival in cities. and entire villages stopping to watch the parade of Africa's wealthiest monarch. The total cost of this pilgrimage has been estimated in modern terms at over $400 billion. The route from Mali to Mecca crossed some of the harshest terrain in the world. The caravan passed through the cities of Walata, Gaza, famous for its salt mines, and into Tuareg territory, before eventually reaching Cairo in Egypt. Despite the harsh desert winds, sandstorms, and threat of bandit raids, the caravan moved with royal precision. Musa's army kept the roads safe, and his servants ensured that every town they stopped in received food, money, and gifts. Everywhere he passed, Mansa Musa left a trail of generosity. Villages received donations. Mosques were repaired. Imams and scholars were recruited. In many places, he gave away so much gold that he disrupted the local economies, causing hyperinflation that would last for years. When the caravan entered Cairo, the capital of the Mamluk Sultanate, the city had never seen anything like it. Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad, ruler of Egypt, received word that a king from the far side of the desert had arrived, bringing with him mountains of gold and the most lavish delegation ever witnessed. According to records by the Egyptian historian al-Makrizi, Mansa Musa declined to meet the Sultan at first, preferring to stay humble before God, was eventually convinced by Egyptian officials to visit the royal court, bowed to God, not to the Sultan, maintaining his independence and dignity, gave away so much gold in Cairo, to the poor, the nobles, and merchants, that the value of gold dropped by nearly 25% across Egypt, donated to mosques, schools, and Quranic centers, winning admiration and envy. Musa stayed in Cairo for nearly 3 months, engaging in diplomacy, scholarship, and philanthropy. His stay is considered one of the most talked about royal visits in medieval history.
After Cairo, the caravan moved toward Mecca, the holy city of Islam, where Mansa Musa performed the sacred rites of the Hajj alongside thousands of other Muslims from across the Islamic world. In Mecca, Musa connected with scholars from Persia, Arabia, and Andalusia, architects and engineers from Cairo and Damascus, spiritual leaders and jurists, whom he later invited to Mali, wealthy merchants and traders from India and North Africa. Musa's pilgrimage was a public relations masterpiece. He positioned Mali as not just a wealthy empire but a pillar of the Islamic world, a land of opportunity, piety, and cultural refinement. He sponsored Islamic scholars, paid for new manuscripts of the Quran, and established relationships that would soon bring Arabic architecture, legal knowledge, and education systems into Mali. He returned home not just with stories, but with teachers, builders, judges, architects, and books that would transform his empire. When Mansa Musa returned to Mali in 1325, he was more than a king, he was an international icon. He returned with the Andalusian architect Abu Ishaq es-Saheli, who designed great mosques and palaces. Dozens of scholars and legal advisors trained in Islamic jurisprudence, books, manuscripts, and the knowledge to create an Islamic education system. Fresh alliances and trade contacts across North Africa and the Middle East. Immediately upon return, Musa ordered the construction of the Great Mosque of Djinguereber in Timbuktu, expanded the University of Sankore, which would rival the schools of Cairo and Baghdad, reinforced Islamic education and Arabic literacy across the empire, standardized currency and trade policies, invited scholars and judges from Mecca to teach in Mali. Under his patronage, Timbuktu became a global center of learning, attracting students from across West Africa, the Maghreb, and even the Ottoman world. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage had several lasting effects. 1. Global awareness of Mali. Maps of the world, like the famous Catalan Atlas of 1375, began featuring Mansa Musa holding a gold nugget, seated on a throne in West Africa. The world now knew of Mali. 2. Economic disruption. The flood of gold into Cairo and beyond created decades-long inflation, reducing the value of gold and destabilizing economies in North Africa and the Middle East. 3. Religious legacy. Islam became deeply entrenched in Mali, not just as a religion but as an institutional force, with judges, scholars, and religious schools shaping the lives of millions. 4. Diplomatic prestige. Mansa Musa's dignified conduct in foreign courts gained him immense respect. He had made Mali a respected partner in global diplomacy. 5. Educational renaissance. The return of knowledge from Mecca helped Timbuktu, Djenné, and Gao become beacons of learning, with thousands of manuscripts and a strong tradition of Arabic scholarship. When Mansa Musa returned to Mali in 1325 CE, he was no longer just a king, he was a living legend. His name had reached Europe, Arabia, and beyond. Scholars told stories of his generosity. Traders recounted tales of his golden cities. Sultans and caliphs spoke of the West African emperor whose wealth eclipsed them all. But Musa's true legacy would not be measured by the weight of gold. It would be seen in the institutions he built, the culture he nurtured, the peace he enforced, and the impact he left on Africa's heart and the Islamic world. He returned to a Mali empire more powerful than ever, and he was determined to make that power eternal. Mansa Musa understood that wealth alone could not sustain greatness. Power needed protection, prosperity needed policy, and trade needed stability. So, he strengthened the military, expanded borders, and reorganized the empire's structure. 1. A mighty army. Musa commanded an army of over 100,000 soldiers, including 40,000 archers trained for defense and rapid attacks, 10,000–15,000 cavalry units on horseback and camelback, foot soldiers equipped with iron-tipped spears, shields, and leather armor. The empire had regional garrisons, troops stationed in trade cities, river ports, and border zones. Mansa Musa's military wasn't just for war, it was for order and protection. Mali became a safe zone for trade, where merchants traveled without fear of robbery. 2. Territory and control. Under Musa's rule, the empire stretched over 2,000 miles, from the Atlantic coast to modern-day Niger and Burkina Faso, encompassing Gao in the east, Timbuktu, which he peacefully on his return, Walata and Tagaza in the north, Djenné, in the south. He created a system of governors and local chiefs loyal to the central throne. Taxes were collected efficiently, trade was regulated, justice was enforced. The result? Mali was the largest, safest, and wealthiest empire in African history at the time. Mansa Musa didn't just want to rule an empire. He wanted to build a civilization that would rival those of Egypt, Persia, and the Islamic caliphates. 1. The City of Light, Timbuktu. Musa transformed Timbuktu from a desert outpost into the intellectual and spiritual capital of West Africa. He commissioned the Great Mosque of Djinguereber, designed by architect Abu Ishaq es-Saheli, using Sudano-Sahelian architecture. He rebuilt and expanded Sankore University, equipping it with thousands of Arabic books, Quranic manuscripts, and trained scholars. At its peak, the University of Sankore had over 25,000 students, a library of hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, faculties in law, medicine, astronomy, grammar, and theology. Timbuktu was called the Athens of Africa by some historians, where African scholars debated philosophy, science, and religion. 2. Religious reform and unity. Mansa Musa was a devout Muslim, but he ruled over a multi-religious empire. His genius was in integrating Islamic principles without suppressing indigenous African beliefs. He built mosques in every major city, established Islamic courts and judges to handle civil and religious cases, encouraged Friday prayers, Quranic schools, and the use of Arabic for administration, respected traditional religions, allowing local customs and festivals to continue in harmony. This created a spiritual blend unique to Mali, Islam at the top, but deeply rooted in African soil. By Mansa Musa's peak, the Mali Empire had become an economic titan, rivaling the Mongol Empire, the Delhi Sultanate, and even Ming China. 1. The Gold Empire. Mali controlled over half the world's gold supply in the 14th century. Gold flowed from the mines of Bambuk, Beret, and Wangara. Mali's gold was traded in Cairo, Tunis, Mecca, Venice and Genoa, Constantinople. Musa standardized weights and measures, improved coinage, and developed a taxation system on trade routes. 2. The salt trade. Salt was as valuable as gold. Mined in Tagaza, it was transported in slabs across the desert. Salt was taxed heavily and traded for grain, ivory, and cloth. It was used to preserve food, cure diseases, and even as currency. 3. Trade cities and ports. Major cities like Gao, Djenné, Walata, and Timbuktu became international trade hubs, attracting Berber, Arab, Songhai, and Hausa merchants. Markets were full of gold, ivory, kola nuts, fine textiles and dyes, books, horses, glassware, spices, perfumes, incense. Mali was more than wealthy. It was connected to the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and sub-Saharan Africa. Mansa Musa forged diplomatic ties that extended far beyond his borders. He established embassies in Morocco, Egypt, and possibly even Spain. European cartographers began placing Mali on the map, literally. The Catalan Atlas of 1375 depicts Mansa Musa holding a golden orb on a throne. Arab historians recorded his generosity and power for centuries. Some reports suggest that envoys from Mali even reached Constantinople and Venice, offering gold in exchange for books, scholars, and trade agreements. Mali's influence stretched across Islamic civilization, from Mecca to Marrakesh, and into Europe, where rumors of African riches would later inspire explorers like Prince Henry the Navigator. Mansa Musa died around 1337 CE, after ruling for roughly 25 years. His death was mourned across Africa and the Islamic world. His successors, particularly Mansa Magan and later Mansa Sulayman, struggled to maintain the empire's vastness, but the glory of Musa's reign cast a long shadow. Though internal conflicts and external threats eventually weakened Mali, the legacy of Mansa Musa remained eternal. Even centuries later, Mansa Musa's legacy endures. Economically, he showcased Africa's potential as a global player. Culturally, he sparked a renaissance in African education, art, and architecture. Spiritually, he cemented Islam as a unifying force in West Africa. Diplomatically, he proved that African rulers could command the world stage. Historically, he became a symbol of African excellence, featured in books, documentaries, and classrooms around the world. Today, Mansa Musa is often named as the richest person in world history, with a modern estimated net worth of over $400 billion. But his true wealth wasn't just in gold, it was in the civilization he built, the paths he paved, and the hope he gave to generations of Africans.